Many students around the region head back to school. There are some new laws also that will impact the new school year.
Tonight, WKYT's Grayson Passmore breaks down what these new laws are.
First, we'll start with school safety. A new law allows schools to bring in armed retired police officers and veterans to patrol school campuses. The goal is to help fill the requirement of one school resource officer on every campus. WKYT spoke to Mercer County Superintendent Jason Boer before the bill passed. He said he'd welcome the options.
You know, all schools have struggled to fill every position for their SROs. So any way we can make our schools safer, I'm all for.
Another law will place an AED in every school building, now including elementary schools. A Fayette County mother told WKYT last year that an AED in every middle and high school was simply not enough.
And you have to have an AED nearby because the amount of time that the heart can stay in VTach or torsades, which is another rhythm that they can go into, and the heart can sustain that is not very long before it stops.
Bo's two children were born with genetic disorders affecting their hearts, with abnormalities that could lead to sudden cardiac arrest.
So somebody's got to be there to shock their heart back into rhythm should they pass out.
Then there's the laws that focus on student behavior. One is aimed at tackling issues on school buses by requiring a parent or guardian to sign a transportation agreement. Another cracks down on vaping by requiring districts to adopt disciplinary procedures for students who violate smoking bans. In Fayette County, Grayson Passmore, WKYT.
There are a few bills that change class requirements. Elementary schools will have to teach cursive handwriting, ensuring students are proficient by the end of 5th grade. And starting in 2025, the Kentucky Board of Education will create an academic standard for teaching civics in high schools.